This is another in the First Read series where I just read a poem for the sheer joy of it for the first time by a poet I don't know or know very little about. I might be completely off, might come back to reading completely differently, but I think, what gives us into poetry in the first place is that sheer joy moment, and that's all this is. So I'm reading something by Catherine Cleary. It's in the Bennington Review, Return to a Meadow, which I kind of think is interesting that they titled this issue that. It's playing off Robert Duncan. I wonder if Duncan actually ever would have been published in the Bennington Review originally. Anyway, it is morning and I'm accidentally drowning. That's the title. I don't read these beforehand. I just kind of go through them and see how they work. That's my first reading. Just looking at it, I always look at the shape of a poem. It kind of drifts down the page to get longer at this bottom right hand. It's got some spacing inside the lines, which I often like when poets do this, the kind of awareness of spacing, pronunciation, and that kind of thing in the middle of the poem. I think that kind of works well. It looks like open form. I'm not going to play with any ideas of traditional form here. It looks like open form, so I'll revise that if I see something as I read. But for this, I'm just going to read it. It is morning, I am accidentally drowning. This first line, usually you'd have a period after morning because we have two things that could be complete sentences here, two clauses. But it's not. It's just kind of left running into each other. But I think that works really well. It's morning, I'm accidentally drowning. And the line break is really great here because the accidentally is like, I am accidentally drowning. And then a moth that she throws up in the next line, moth in my breast milk, which is the next line. So she's actually, she or whoever the speaker is here is drowning a moth in breast milk, but it's at the same time, I am drowning. And without the period, it's in the morning. It is like, it feels like the person's drowning in the morning itself. So more complicated than just drowning the moth in breast milk, which is complicated enough. I'm trying to wrap my head around how you actually would drown a moth in breast milk. It's like, are you pumping into a bottle and then the bottle is open, or are you pouring out some of the bottle into a sink and the moth is there? I'm not really sure how that actual image works with the moth itself, but this kind of irony of something drowning in breast milk, which is, what we think of, stereotypically as the milk that gives us life in the beginning. And there's so many, so many stories and like pushes around that itself, where the mother should give breast milk, what it means, all that kind of, like, is it, there's all kind of stuff about being a good mother and all this kind of stuff around breast milk that it's just interesting. It starts off with the moth drowns in it, and I am accidentally drowning, like the speaker's drowning as well there. I don't know if the speaker feels like they're drowning in the morning or in the breast milk as it is. I think sometimes being a parent can, especially a nursing mom, even more than a parent, can feel like drowning a little bit. It slides down the sink ceramic walls in a heavy flap of wet wings. So the moth is kind of drowning. You get to see the actual act of drowning, the drowning moth as it goes down to rest motionless at the drain. Okay, it is a sink here. And it's sliding down the ceramic walls, like drowning in it. So I'm still not sure about that little first drowning. Maybe the moth is landed in an open bottle of breast milk and it gets poured out. It goes down the drain. I'm not really sure about what's happening with that, but still, whatever we see this moth kind of like dying as it goes down. It is evening, so we just shifted gears. So it's morning, then it's evening, and there's no comma in or anything here. Usually you'd have that if it's going to be another, clause starting, but we don't, which is kind of makes it feel like you're in the evening more. It is evening, and my husband and father-in-law talk softly about the children at the border. So you get a contrast here, which I kind of think is an interesting contrast in the beginning of this mother who's drowning the moth in the breast milk. And then here it's evening, and my husband and father-in-law, these two male figures, are talking about children at the border, which is it's a much more abstract discussion. I mean, this is, has political implications. We know about the children at the border in the U.S. who were taken away from their parents. So there's this kind of, double edge here where it's a significant issue. It has to do with children, but also it doesn't feel like they're in the space of child bearing the same way, if that makes sense. It's not them being in the morning drowning something. They're talking abstractly, and they talk softly. They whisper so as not to wake the baby, so they literally don't want to wake the baby who's there by talking about children at the borders whose eyelids are fluttering, lashes blonde. So the fluttering here, I like this play on the fluttering. It comes back to the heavy flap of wet wings. Earlier of the moth, it's like the moth and the child somehow are connected in this fluttering. And the child is sleeping, and you had kids, you don't want to wake the baby. And there's a way in which you're not overwhelmed when you're not trying to wake the baby in the same way as you would be when you're breastfeeding or something. Lashes blonde where they join skin. It's a very distinct image. Lashes blonde where they join skin. Not sure what to do with that. It's very clearly baby-like, something that's distinct for the baby, but also is so vivid in contrast to the children at the border here. Of the 5,500 children separated, then we go to numbers. 545 parents cannot be found, which is there's a kind of a huge sadness to that. My husband's voice raised, quivers. I love the spacing here. I actually think it really works well here. It's as if we're slowing down the conversation because it feels like we don't want to wake the baby, but also because it's such a heavy topic. My husband's voice raised, quivers, volume, he says, is not the best measure. But it's often where we start. So this kind of sense of, the numbers are not being a good measure, but it's where we start. But it's our husband's voice. There's something about that stands out to me. It's the husband's voice that says this. What might be different if maternity were genderless? All right, so maybe I was right to think about, there's something about the husband's voice, or what might be different if maternity were genderless, if everybody had to do it, not just the women who had to deal with this issue, the husband who can look back at the numbers. The child sleeping isn't like physically involved in the same way. The way we speak of God. Can God change God's mind? That's a pretty strong shift there. What might be different in maternity and genderless, the way we speak of God? I'm not sure the way we speak of God, is that like how there's the child, the husband and the father-in-law are talking about those kids, they're like macro level, or is this something else, right? Is that how they're speaking about God? Of the children, my father-in-law says it must be more complicated. It must be more complicated. Why? I'm not sure of that, right? Can God change God's mind? What's going on here with this? Are they, is God connected to gender here? I'm not sure. In the photographs, the baby's chin is slick with milk. We don't know which baby at this point with this image. Is it the speaker's baby, who we know has been drinking breast milk earlier, or is it the babies at the border? We're not really sure. It is morning. We come back to that very first line in this one. So we have this contrast again. It is morning, but we don't have it at the beginning of the line, kind of setting the scene the same way. It is morning. The milk dribbles down his jaw before disappearing in the sunshine. So back to the baby again, like a very vivid image of being with the baby. And then it is evening. switching gears again to that line 5 here. It is evening. Upstairs, twin globes bathe their bed in light. Twin globes. I mean, that sounds like it would be twin light globes, but we're not sure in the beginning because we had two speakers in that second verse. It is evening, but this is closed off with a period. The moon and its reflection. So are these the twin globes coming in? The moon and its reflection, or is that just coming into the room? Back to it is morning. I love the back and forth here, as it feels very much like if you had very little kids where they're breastfeeding like this. The days and nights, they really do start to blend into each other because of how little sleep you get, or how connected you become to the baby in that way. In the morning, I will again push the baby into and out of a beam of sun, thinking about our bodies. Tired of thinking about our bodies, this kind of sense of being completely connected in a way that it feels like the husband and the father-in-law aren't connected, but also in a way that these children are separated from the bodies of their parents earlier. There's no clear answers in this poem, I don't think. I think, personally, that this seems more like a poem where you're thinking through things than trying to come up with answers. You're thinking through the complications of dealing with being a parent, dealing with breastfeeding, versus explaining what it is and trying to tell somebody all the answers to what's right or wrong about any of it. This is an interesting piece to me. I'm kind of fascinated by it. The language is interesting. The line breaks are interesting. I like the space in it. The poet's really kind of controlling the speed and flow of the poem very well. And it's not preachy. So I'm really kind of interested to read more about Catherine Cleary and her work. That's it. First reading. I think I might come back and read this one a little bit more differently if I had more poems in context. But for now, that's what I'll end with.